It was about 20 years ago. I was living in Connecticut at the time. I was newly divorced and I had two kids, and my life was just mentally in the gutter. I hated myself. I hated life. I was binging on sugar all day long. I'd been a sugar addict since I was a child. And I didn't like my job. I was really good at playing the blame game and blaming everybody else for my problems. I was scared of my finances. I didn't know what else I was going to do now that I was newly divorced. And I would just eat my way through the day. The only thing I cared about were my children. So one afternoon, they're with their dad, and it's a Sunday afternoon. I'm bored to tears. So I grab a box of Oreo cookies and I thought, I'm going to go over to my neighbor Dan and Linda's and bother them. So I walk in the house and Dan is in the den watching TV. So I plop down on the big chair next to him, chomp, chomp, chomp. I'm working on a column of Oreos. And I said, Dan, what are you watching on TV? He said, shh, Laura, I'm watching a documentary. And I said, oh, on what? He said, shh, the Navy SEALs. Well, I'm embarrassed to admit this now. Don't tell anybody. I didn't really know who they were. So I figured, well, they're kind of maybe the military. So I thought, well, I don't want to go home and be alone this afternoon. I'll just sit here and hang out and eat more Oreos. Well, in spite of myself, I started watching the show. And about 10 minutes into it, I'm looking at Dan and saying, Dan, these guys are amazing. They have integrity. They have values. They care about themselves. They're fit. They're on a schedule. They live a routine. They take care of each other. They're so passionate. They have such a mission. Dan, these guys are so mentally tough. And I'm such a mental weenie. I want to be like these guys. And he looks at me and he says, Laura, are you on some kind of a sugar high? Are you at the age of 48 going to go off now and join the Navy SEALs? And I said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I got up and I threw the package of Oreos in his lap and I left and I went home and I really hit my deepest of all deepest bottoms. I mean, it was a cold cement floor and I went thud. And I said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I said, I'm done. And I got up and I said, I want what they have. And this was before, like, the internet was just getting started. There was no Instagram or YouTube. I went to the library and I started to read everything I could about the mindset of the Navy SEALs. I mean, and besides, what's not to love about a guy in uniform, right? So then from there, I got kind of ramped up. And I always loved watching the Olympics. And I said, I'm going to study the habits of Olympic athletes. Can you imagine any two groups that are more resilient, more motivated, who are so highly trained that they know how to get up when they fail and dust themselves off and keep moving? These people really understand success and they know what they want. They know how to go after it. So I started studying the habits of Olympic athletes, and then I sprinkled on top of it a little bit over the years, a little bit of studying of Stoic philosophy. That was the last day that I ever ate any sugar or junk food, and that was 22 and a half years ago, May 20th of 2000. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because here today we're talking about aging and really what is our attitude about ourselves as we grow older, because we all know that out there we're becoming invisible, right? I mean, in the corporate world, it seems to me at this point, from everything I'm reading in the press and on social media, it's before 50 and over age 50. And if you're over age 50 in most of society, as well as in the corporate world, you're starting to become a little invisible. I'm 69 now, and I see it all the time. And so I want to share with you today this whole idea of how can we apply that Navy SEAL mindset to us personally getting older. I had so much success with learning how to harness their mindset that, gosh, I'm making it, it's my business now. I've been doing this for years, coaching women how to think like a Navy SEAL and how to develop the habits of an Olympic athlete so that they can win more in their lives, reduce the burnout. Everybody's definition of winning is differently. And for today, our definition of winning is how can I really age the way I want to age, mentally, physically, spiritually. We don't have control over much of our physical, which I'm going to talk about. So how can we apply that Navy SEAL mental toughness mindset to growing older? Now I'm going to press pause in all this for a minute because I want to share something really important. Pause. Being mentally tough about getting older does not mean that we pretend that stuff going on in our bodies and out there in our lives isn't happening. It's not a suck it up buttercup attitude. That's never what I coach in my program. Mental toughness is actually looking at the reality of the situation first and saying, oh, okay, getting older really sucks. It's really horrible sometimes. It's really hard sometimes. I acknowledge that all the time. I don't pretend everything's great. Acknowledge it. Maybe you're going through cancer or you're having a crisis in your family right now. As we get older, right, we have a lot of loss. Our bodies are beginning to wind down. We're beginning to experience issues with parents. We may have a child that's in prison. We may be bankrupt. As we get older, we have a lot of experiences. And so I'm not saying we pretend that they're not there. We look at them head on. You know, there's a phrase in the Navy SEAL community, when they hear the sound of guns, they run to it, not away from it. So I'm encouraging everybody, we don't want to run away from our fears and worries about aging. Cry in your beer, talk to your therapist, attend one of Tracy's workshops or wellness retreats. But then we put it on a timer. We put those emotions on a timer and say, okay, I've processed that. Now, what do I want to do with myself? And how do I want to proceed? What kind of attitude, like Tracy says, what's your intention for today? What would your intention for today be about getting older? You may be 51 years old, 61, or you may be 91. I have a 3.5-year-old grandson. Guess what? He's getting older. So we're all getting older, and each generation has its own challenges, right? So I encourage you today. So here's one thing I'd like you to ask yourself, and maybe you can journal about this. Ask yourself, how many years do I think I'm actually going to be alive? Kind of a kooky question, but hang with it. It's an important question. So for example, for me, I'm 69. I think, well, I'll probably live until I'm 90 based on my health and my family situation. So that is 21 years. So once you come up with that equation, you say to yourself this very powerful question: how do I want to live my 21 years? There's all this age discrimination stuff going on out there, and we could go on and on and on about that. I mean, I go into CVS and I look at these anti-aging creams. I'm in aisle 3 and I'm starting to scream at the cream. What's wrong with getting older? Why does this have to be anti-aging? You know, and then of course people walk along and say there's a weird old lady in aisle 2 screaming at the cream. I think she's senile. You know, it's like, what the heck is wrong with getting older? Right? My point is, we have a lot of information out there, even from childhood, about when you're getting older, you're invisible, you're no longer of value. Well, from a Navy SEAL Olympic athlete point of view, from a Laura Iman point of view, I encourage you to pause and say, how can I change my mindset around this? Because it's easy to buy into. It's very, very easy to sink into that pity party and buy into it. And sometimes I do, but I don't stay there. So you can ask yourself, when you experience that, you can say, here's the first thing you do to changing your mindset. You say, today, I make a decision to not buy into what's going on out there. And it's really something that you might have to decide intentionally every single day. It's what I call doing a mental push-up. Every day I do my mental push-ups. I'm not going to buy into the negativity out there. We have that choice. We really do. We can either buy into it and be a victim and go have an organ recital with our friends. Oh, my heart, my gut, my this, my that. Or we can say, I really just don't want to go there. I'd rather go to my knitting group and talk about fun stuff and have a good laugh. I'd rather go see Jane Fonda in the new 80-something movie that's coming out. That looks hilarious. Getting older is painful and hard and tough, but we also have a choice to make it what we want to make of it. And everybody can define what their positive path towards aging is. I personally just don't buy into any of it, but I'm very accustomed. I've developed that. I've done a lot of mental push-ups around this. So I'm in the habit now of doing it. And for you, it might take some time. If you have never really thought this way before, or if you have, good for you, and keep on it. Journal it every single day. Here's another fun exercise. When you are in CVS and something hits you that's jarring, that you find age discrimination wise, pause and say, oh, really? I'm not going to buy into that, and act accordingly. So number one, you make the decision to say, I choose to think differently today, because I can't control anything going on around there. And there's a lot in my body I can't control. I can't stop the aging process, but I can control how I think about it and my attitude. And then number two, take action steps every day to reflect that decision. The action steps are very important. We don't want to just make the decision. We want to take action steps every day to support that. I mean, even to the point where you may say, gee, I'm going to get involved in a volunteer community that fights age discrimination, or I'm going to attend one of Tracy's wellness retreats because I really want to get rid of that. And I want to contribute to the group to age with sage, which I love that phrase. So you can take action steps. The exciting part about this is you really kind of feel lighter, and you're kind of out of this prison of buying into what other people and what our culture tells us to think. When I was living in Florida before COVID, I gave a workshop for students in college. And it was on mental toughness. And one of the students came up right on the stage afterwards. I mean, I had not even put my microphone down. And she comes up and she says, what is this mental toughness stuff you're telling me about? You know, you're showing off your gold medal Olympic weightlifting and your biceps and telling us all we should be mentally tough. You have no idea what I've been through growing up. And besides, what degrees do you have to tell us to be mentally tough? She was very upset, and I'm glad she came to me as opposed to, you know, kind of disappearing out the back door. She was very hurt, and I hit a nerve in her, and I said, well, I'll call her Susan. She didn't even tell me what her name was. I said, Susan, you're right. What degrees do I have? And I said, actually, it's what degrees do I not have? Because you see, I had two very expensive degrees that I got. They were really costly, and I had them framed and they were hanging over either side of my desk. And one degree over here was a PhD in self-pity. I really worked that degree, and that cost me a lot. And then I had another degree over here, and it was a master's in a sense of entitlement. And it was when I was studying the Navy SEALs and becoming mentally tough, Susan, that I took both of those degrees down and I threw them in the dumpster. And I said, oh, in order for me to be able to make a decision to have a better life and be more successful, I got to get rid of that shit, because that was really pulling me down. So I encourage you, it's really easy, especially if we ourselves are sick, when our defenses are down, it's really easy to be able to slide into having a pity party. It's really easy to have a sense of entitlement. Why me? You know, well, we're all getting older. So I'm not saying don't have a pity party. We have to vent. We have to feel our feelings. I'm a big believer in that. But we don't want to stay there. Put the egg timer on the pity party. I used to have them all the time. Nobody would come, but I'd still have them all the time. Have you ever heard the expression, it feels so good to feel so bad? Well, my life really changed when I said, oh, that thought no longer serves me. Being a victim no longer serves me. It was highly unattractive anyway. So when I got rid of those, I really started to turn a corner with my attitude. So I want to take some questions or some feedback, but I want to share with you one thing because it's so easy to feel sad. And again, we want to process it. But just think of, taking that degree down from the wall and just throwing it in the dumpster and saying, okay, I've had my pity party, enough. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go take an action step. I'm going to go walk the dog. I'm going to go rake leaves. I'm going to go clean out a closet because I don't want to be there anymore. I want to be a really cool older person, right? So in closing, there's one there's one line, one phrase that I can share with you, which really kind of sums up shifting your attitude. And it is, instead of saying, oh, I have to get old. I mean, we have no choice. I have to get old. No, I get to get old. It's a privilege to be older. It's a privilege to grow old. Because I didn't die when I was 35, leaving 2 young children. I mean, there may be people here who have had that experience in their family. I didn't have that. How did I get so lucky? I was able to see my kids graduate from college. I didn't die from cancer. I'm now here able to usher my mother's very sick right now. I'm able to hop on an airplane, which I'll probably do tomorrow, and go to Florida and be by her bedside. That's a privilege. So even though I got all this stuff going on with my body, and I could spend an hour talking to you about what's going on in my body, but I don't do that. Instead, I say, oh, thank you, God, at the end of the day for all that I have going on. Give me the strength, but it's also, I'm so grateful that I have been able to come this far. And I'm probably going to do 21 more years. So guide me in how I can live a rich, vibrant, prosperous life. And